Welcome to Rooting for You, a seasonal gardening podcast for non-experts. I'm Tess, and I know nothing.
And I'm Alyce, and I know some things.
Each week we'll chat about one gardening topic and then discuss the effort-reward payoff by asking, is the juice worth the squeeze? Just a heads up, there might be a bit of swearing in this episode. You've been warned. So the only reason I even slightly know what a hardwood cutting is because we just briefly discussed it in our Intro to Winter episode. In that episode, we spoke a bit about plant genetics, and it pretty much blew my mind because it's not something that I've ever thought about before. Now, while this might seem like a more intermediate topic, because it kind of did to me, Alyce assures us that we're still in beginner territory, and as a massive sell, it's going to be just a fun garden activity rather than some of the more essential topics we've been discussing recently. So Alyce, let's talk about hardwood cuttings.
Let's talk about how to get plants for free. Yeah, as you said, this is by no means an essential job, and if this doesn't sound fun to you, don't even worry about it. But I think it's pretty fun, and should you pull it off, which obviously you will after listening to this podcast, it's quite incredible that you've created your own tree from no resources and for no cost. So it is slow though, and effective. You're not going to have a fruit tree 150 centimeters tall next winter to plant, but if you're in it for the long game, you will eventually get a decent sized tree.
And it's like a little side hobby of your hobby.
Exactly. And it's brilliant gifts as well. Like, fruit trees are expensive. So being able to give someone a little fruit tree, like as a housewarming or like when a baby's born or something, I think is really sweet. It's not how most of my fruit trees came into this world. I did buy them because I wanted that advantage of it being a couple of years old. But I have a couple of figs that I grew from cuttings that are very big and very productive in just 2 years. So kind of like what we said in the planting fruit trees episode, figs are a brilliant one to begin with, and they would be my absolute pick for the hardwood cuttings.
Okay, let's take a step back to basics. What exactly is a hardwood cutting?
Yeah, brilliant question. I don't even know how to describe this, but basically we're taking a branch of a tree and encouraging that branch to grow roots that turn into the identical version of that tree.
A baby plant, if you will.
A baby plant, yeah, but it's a baby plant not through the usual like sexual reproduction. It's a genetic clone baby plant.
Mm-hmm. Which is like, it feels like a nature scientific miracle that you can have a cracker of a fig tree and say, this tree is going really well. I want to plant another fig tree. Let's create one that's going to do just as well as a genetic clone.
Exactly. It would be like this. It'd be like you chopping off your finger and then growing an identical Tess from your finger.
Man, there are some days that I need that.
That sounds absolutely crazy, but that is actually what we're doing in the garden. So yeah, you are growing a tree from its finger.
That's so gross.
Now, there are plenty, again, we talked about this in Intro to Winter, but there are plenty of different plants that you can kind of clone in different ways. But for the hardwood cuttings, what we're really talking about is roses, figs, mulberries, apples, pears, peaches, apricots, cherries, that kind of thing. So those deciduous fruit trees.
Mm-hmm.
And again, fig being my favourite. Now, we do this in winter when the plant is dormant. So brilliant time now.
Okay.
Shall we crack on with exactly how to do this?
Yeah.
Okay.
How do you find the right finger to cut off?
Your left or your right hand? Now, what you need to do first is find a tree. A neighbour's tree is brilliant because, it does well in your climate. It doesn't have to be a neighbour though, like someone else in Melbourne, fabulous. If you've got a tree on your own property, you can do that. Frankly, you could go to like a park and cut off a finger and take that if you found some tree there that you liked. But basically you find the tree and then you want to find a branch that's about the thickness of a pencil.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's going to have some soft greenish growth at the end of that branch, which is going to be the recent growth. We actually don't want that. That would be like a softwood cutting. We're going to cut that off. So the
Okay.
new green stuff. Then we're going to go 15 to 30 centimetres down this pencil branch and we're going to cut that off.
So are we starting, when we're talking about measurements, are we starting at the closer to the trunk or closer to the outer canopy of leaves?
The outer canopy.
Okay.
So
run that
working
through
in.
again. So you're starting at the outer canopy and you are going, don't worry about the green little stuff.
Chop that off.
Chop that off.
Then go 30 centimetres.
centimetres, chop
in.
again.
Yep, chop again.
So you end up with a 30 centimetre long pencil.
Exactly right.
What if it has offshoots on it? Chop those off?
Chop those off.
Okay, so we've got a pencil.
We've got a pencil. Probably the ones on the very end, you're not going to have a lot of offshoots because they're kind of the newer growth. But yeah, if there are, chop them off. We want the pencil shape. Then when we do these cuts, we want to cut on an angle. This is really important when you're pruning trees, when you're taking cuttings. Anytime you cut into a plant, you actually want to cut on an angle. So you don't want a blunt pencil, you want like a pencil tip.
Yeah, so you just put your secateurs
Yeah.
diagonally to the
Exactly.
pencil.
Exactly. You know, there's a few reasons why, but basically it's better for the plant health and make sure that moisture doesn't, like say a drop of water like sits on the top. It's not going to sit on the top, it's going to run off. That's the main reason. And when you're doing this, it is important to remember which is the top and which is the bottom. And the top
Oh, yeah, good one.
is the part of the plant that's further out and the bottom is the one closer to the trunk. The other thing is whenever you cut into a tree, again, pruning, taking cuttings, whatever, you want to do the cuts just above a bud. Now the bud, you have your pencil, your branch, it has little knobs on it that are actually what's going to be the fruit and flowers and leaves come spring. It looks very obvious when you see it as kind of a growth on the pencil, maybe every 5 centimetres along.
Okay.
So when you cut, you always cut just above a bud, and above being outer canopy.
So it'll be little buddy bit, chop out towards the leaves.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
God, this is a very visual discussion for a audible medium.
Yeah, we're making it hard for you guys. Google a picture of it. Just
No, I think I've got it. So working from the trunk out, you've got trunk, knobby bit, chop, knobby bits on the way out, chop again to get rid of the rest of the more wispy leaves.
nailed it. Exactly right. Don't Google a picture, guys.
I hope that's
We've
clear.
got this.
It's clear to everyone else as it is to me because I was using hand signals as I did that.
I was closing my eyes and just listening. So that's how you're going to cut it. It's as simple as that, which, of course, when you know what you're doing, I mean, that's like 5 seconds, right? But, of course, the first time you're going to be analysing buds, et cetera, and green woody bits, I want you to collect quite a few because not every single one of them is going to take. Hopefully they do, but, I mean, we've got a whole tree with plenty of pencils on it, so I would say take maybe 8 per tree. Remember which way is the top. Then
Yes.
you're going to go home or to your potting station or whatever's going on. You're going to get a pot. I want this pot to be probably 20 centimetres deep minimum.
Okay.
And we're going to plant in the pencils in a propagating mix, ideally. So nurseries sell what's called propagating mixes or like a seed raising mix or any kind of loose soil. What's really important here is we're encouraging that pencil to grow roots, and they're going to be really tiny roots at the start. So we want to make sure the soil is really loose so those roots can easily make space under the ground. So if you're going, if you're really setting up for ideal scenario, invest in the propagating mix. If you've got a bag of potting mix at home, you can just use that. One pot, I'd plant, it depends on how big the pot is, but you can plant all 8 of your pencils in there.
Okay.
We're going to plant the pencils 2/3 of the way down. So 1/3 of the pencil above the soil, 2/3 of the pencil below the soil. So what you want is there to be 1 or 2 buds above the soil that you can see, and these in spring are going to shoot out leaves and kind of turn into your plant. And then the rest of the pencil that's under the ground, those buds that are now under the ground are actually going to form roots. So we want more buds under the ground because what's really important is to get a good root system developing rather than necessarily favouring kind of leaf development on the top. We want the roots to start first. So once you've got your pot, you've stuck in all your pencils, you water them in well. Keeping it moist is really important. And then you're done.
Where should your pot live?
Excellent question. It doesn't need full sun. At this point, sunshine isn't important, and I'd actually say don't put it in full sun because we want to keep it really moist. The worst thing we could do is let this dry out. So part shade, if you've got a little greenhouse or something, just like like one of those little plastic covered ones, brilliant, put them in there. But really anywhere that's not going to get knocked, that's out of the way, is going to be totally fine. And again, your only job, at least until the weather warms up, and even when the weather does warm up, is just to keep them moist.
And you mentioned then just bumping them, which brought a question to my mind. Are they quite delicate?
They're very delicate.
Okay.
Yeah. At this point, they're very delicate. You've got these tiny roots growing from a pencil, and if we knock them, we break a couple. They've probably only got a couple, and then we've lost that cutting. You can do this in the ground. A lot of people do this, just instead of in a pot, like finding a trench or some soil in the ground and doing it. I think for the beginner, and unless you're like starting your own orchard, just get a pot because you can monitor them way better. You can monitor the moisture better, and you can make sure they're not knocked. I feel like if you had a stick in the ground, you'd like come back a few weeks later and forget it was there and like chomp it over, or the dog's going to knock it over or something like that. So look, you can do it. And obviously in nature, sticks would break off trees and they'd land in the dirt and they'd grow roots. Like that would happen. But I think make your life easy and get a pot. What's going to happen in spring is those little buds that are above are going to shoot leaves out. As soon as you see that, you have succeeded.
Ah, okay.
So it's not actually that long until you know whether your cuttings have taken or not. I would say in 8, if you got 5 of them, that would be a really good result.
Okay.
But remember, that's 5 fruit trees.
Once you start seeing the buds start to shoot out for spring, is that an indication as well that you should be planting it into something else, or can it just stay in its pot?
Yeah, really good question. So initially, it's still got quite a bit of room in that pot to develop its roots, and we don't want to repot it too early because we want the roots to really be established. But having said that, we also can't leave it, 8 trees or 5 trees at this point in that small pot. So you will need to repot. I think, and some trees are going to do this a lot faster than others. Like a fig is going to create mad roots in no time. Other ones are going to be slower. What I'd say is if you lift up the pot and you see any kind of root coming out the bottom, you've sometimes seen that in the seedling punnet. If you see that, absolutely time to repot.
Okay.
So I don't want you doing it too early, but once they're coming out the bottom, then they really need to be done. You'll then need to tip the pot out and kind of very loosely break up the plants that are in there. Kind of like when you have your seedlings and you have multiple seedlings in the one punnet, now you've got multiple fruit trees in the one punnet. Then what you'll do is you'll pot those individually in their own pots. And then you'll keep kind of sizing them up and repotting them into a bigger pot, and then probably in 2 years they'll be big enough to put in the ground.
Wow.
Yeah. So in that time, you've got to keep them moist, which is important, and you'll need to repot them at some points. But other than that, there's not a lot else you're doing. So it does take a lot of time, but again, there's not a lot of effort in it. And I think it is quite fun because even though you don't have a fruit tree, ready to give you fruit come spring in like 2 months' time from now, you'll know if your project's worked. And once those leaves come out, you're home and host. It's a
That's
plant.
amazing.
Yeah. Now, some people use what's called a rooting hormone, and they dip the bottom of the cutting into this before they stick it in the soil, the bottom of the pencil. This is meant to encourage the roots to grow. I never have used it, and I've had, I think, plenty of success with growing cuttings. So I wouldn't say you need to go out and buy it. If you've got some already, for whatever reason, sure, use it.
Yeah, but not essential.
Not essential. Again, people have been growing trees like this for plenty of time before they had little rooting hormone powders. So as much as I keep going on about how this process takes quite a bit of time, there are cuttings that we can do, and it's a slightly separate method, so we'll do a separate episode on it, like lavender, rosemary, mint. These can be established quite quickly. So you can, if you're looking for a cutting and you just think the fruit tree is possibly too long of a game, come different times a year, we can do, something like lavender, rosemary, mint, and we can get a pretty big plant in just a couple of months. So that might be more appealing to you if you want kind of a quicker win. But again, a mint plant or a lavender or rosemary are very cheap to buy. Fruit trees are not. So there's a reason why the harder the process or the longer the process, the more it's going to cost you if you buy it.
Once it comes to spring and you start seeing the buds come out, we've had it in a shady spot to keep it moist. Is that the time to move it into a sunnier spot?
Yeah, you definitely want some sun as the weather warms up, and you want it to be photosynthesizing and all that stuff. I don't think it needs like really harsh afternoon sun. Like, this plant isn't trying to set fruit at this point, and again, drying out, it's going to be the worst thing we could ever do. So I'd say give it some nice morning sun, midday sun, and then probably in the afternoon, I'd be happy if it was in the shade.
For people who just want to give this a crack and they don't have a particular plant in mind, so I think it's going to kind of fall into two groups of people that say, I've got this wonderful fig, rose, apple tree and I want to create a replica of it, or people are like, I'm just keen to give it a shot.
Yeah.
Are there ones that are more hardy or more durable and easier to do this off, or is it all kind of the same?
Yeah, I mean, again, comes back to the fig.
The fig's the one really if you just want to give it a shot. That's
if you just want to give it a crack, a fig, if you took 8 cuttings of a fig, I would not be surprised if you got 8 figs out of it. They are just so easy. So if that's the aim of the game,
I think you refer to them as a monster.
Yeah, exactly. Their roots are monsters. So if you're wanting to give this a crack just to see if you can do it and see how the results go, cannot go past a fig. All the other ones, absolutely doable. And I'd say pretty much on par, but nowhere near the success rate of Figley Adams.
So the big question, is the juice worth the squeeze? This is where we look at the effort-reward ratio of today's topic. The categories are superstar, high effort, high reward. Completing this will make you feel like an absolute rock star. Best on ground, low effort, high reward. Quick wins and fill-ins, low effort, low reward. And finally, the wooden spoon, high effort, but not much reward.
Tessie, am I going to see you growing some hardwood cuttings anytime soon?
I started by saying how much I loved the science behind it, because I just think it's really exciting that you can do it. And it sounds like a super just fun side hobby of your hobby. Those are all the things that are really appealing to me. If I was to do a fig tree, for example, I wouldn't have a spot in my garden to put 5 fig trees. So that is something that's on my mind. But maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe you just give it a shot and then you just gift them to people around to see.
I think they're wonderful gifts.
Yeah. I'm interested in those kind of quicker wins of the smaller plants that we were just talking about, like mint, lavender, those kinds of things. I think that feels more achievable for a long-term investment in my own garden.
Yeah.
But that I don't think precludes you from just having a crack at seeing what I can grow from hardwood. As I say, it's just the particularly appealing part to me is it's kind of like a fun science experiment.
Yeah, if I had kids, I would 100% be like,
oh, that's a great idea, yeah.
Like, here's a science experiment for us to do on the school holidays. Let's grow some plants from cuttings. And I know living where you live, Tess, there's probably not a big community of this, but there's a lot of places where people go to like swap produce and, anything that they've grown, and that also includes plants. So, if you went down to like some kind of produce swap, you could swap your figs for, all manner of fun things that you're not producing and growing in your own garden, edibles like produce or plants. So, there's more gains to it than, like I grow heaps of things from cuttings that I never plant in my own garden. I don't have room for them, nor do I want more of them. I love the fact that I I find it really fun. And then I love the fact that I've got something of value to exchange with someone else that's not money.
And particularly in winter where there's not always essential things to be doing. So this could be something that's just a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
So for me, it definitely sounds like low effort. Oh, gosh. Here we go again. Best on ground.
The only thing that is going to tip it over to superstar for me as far as effort is it is low effort, but it's over a sustained period of time. And I think that tips it into the higher effort category. So I'm going to say superstar. The reward of a fruit tree that's, going to be around for 100 years is amazing, but you are going to need to keep the moisture up to it for years before that. So,
and some people might tip it back into a low reward for some people because it's not going to be instantaneous. The joy from it really for me is come spring, is it budding?
Maybe it's a quick win and fill in.
Oh, okay.
A little quick win for winter.
Low effort, low rewards. And then, once it comes to spring and it's back to planting, eventually when it becomes time to, you're going to repot it a number of times. And then when it comes time to finally put it in the ground, that's when we go back to planting bare-rooted fruit trees.
Exactly. It's like a whole cycle. Go back to that episode and, there you go. One other thing that I think is really sweet, Morgan, who my stepsister, she is very involved in gardening, kind of community gardening, and she was in a rental property that had this beautiful fig tree and it had the most amazing fruit on it, just hundreds and hundreds of figs every year. She was moving house and really wanted to take the fig tree with her, so to speak. So she took some cuttings of it and, now at her new place, she has the same fig tree. Obviously,
how good's that?
Not as big and not as productive, but,
it will be.
It will be, exactly. And actually, I have a couple of cuttings from that fig tree as well now in my garden. So,
oh, how nice is that?
Yeah, so the fig tree lives on in our family, even though now someone else has inherited that property or, however it goes. So there is a nice kind of lineage with trees that when you move, you can't always take the plant itself, but you kind of can take the plant with this.
Rooting for You is hosted by Alyce and Tess, artwork by Lauren Janine. You can find us on Instagram at rootingforyoupod or email rootingforyou@alycealexandra.com. And remember, we are rooting for you.